You're going to do what? Janet asked, her eyes wide. Jack was currently rummaging through the hall closet, throwing coats and umbrellas aside. He wants a stallion? I'll give him a stallion. I'll give him a whole herd of 'em. He pulled out an old, battered Stetson hat that Cindy had used for a Halloween costume years ago. He jammed it onto his head. Jack, you can't be serious, Cindy giggled. You're going to pretend to be your own brother? Not just a brother. I wrestle steers, I drink my whiskey neat, and I don't take no sass from no one. Janet crossed her arms. Mr. Furley will see through you in 2 seconds. He sees what he wants to see, Jack argued. He stepped into the bathroom and emerged a moment later with a dark smudge on his cheek, and the only way you can tell us apart is this mole. That's eyeliner, Jack, Janet deadpanned. In the dim light of a lounge, it's a mole. Now, Cindy, go tell Mr. Furley that Jack's brother is in town. Tell him Austin is looking for a little company. Chapter 4. The cowboy rides in. The transformation was startling. When Jack emerged from the bedroom an hour later, he wasn't Jack anymore. He wore a denim shirt unbuttoned just enough to be suggestive, the cowboy hat pulled low over his eyes, and a swagger that seemed to take up the entire room. Well, boy howdy, he drawled, leaning against the doorframe, as Mr. Furley entered with a young woman in tow. Veronica was stunning, tall, blonde, and possessing a sharp, observant gaze that made Jack's stomach do a nervous flip. This is him? Furley asked, his voice full of awe. Jack's twin? Austin Tripper, Jack said, stepping forward and taking Veronica's hand. He didn't just shake it, he kissed the back of it, his eyes locked onto hers with a predatory intensity that Jack Tripper wouldn't have dared. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. My eyes must be bugging out like a stomped-on toad frog, 'cause you are the prettiest thing I've seen since the bluebonnets bloomed in Austin. Furley beamed. You see, Veronica? A real man. A Texan. Veronica smiled, a slow, playful curve of the lips. A cowboy in Santa Monica. How exotic. We're closer than 2 ticks on a dog's tail, me and my brother Jack, Jack continued, ignoring Janet's muffled snort from the kitchen. Though he's a bit of a twerp, if I'm being honest. A real cream puff. Oh, I don't know, Veronica said, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. I've always had a soft spot for cream puffs. But a cowboy. That's a new frontier. The night began as a game, but as Jack, now Austin, led Veronica to the sofa, the stakes began to change. He found himself telling stories of imaginary ranches and long nights under the stars. He found himself looking at Veronica and seeing not a spy, but a woman who looked bored of her father's games. And from the kitchen, Janet Wood watched them. She watched the way Jack leaned in, the way he laughed that deep, fake Texan laugh, and she realized with a jolt of jealousy that she liked the wolf much more than she should. Chapter 5. The Fog and the Fire. The evening took a turn for the chaotic when a thick, Pacific fog rolled in, blanketing the city in a white, impenetrable shroud. Airports closed, Furley announced, returning from a quick trip to his own apartment with a bottle of bourbon. The tiny apartment felt smaller by the minute. Jack was trapped. He had to be Austin for Furley and Veronica, but he had to be Jack for the phone call he was expecting regarding the restaurant job. He spent the next 2 hours in a frantic blur. He would go to the kitchen as Austin, wash off the mole, discard the hat, and emerge as Jack to answer the phone or talk to Janet. Then he would reverse the process, resmudging the mole and reclaiming the drawl. Where's Jack? Furley asked, leaning back on the sofa, 3 drinks in. He's, studying, Cindy shouted from the kitchen. Spanish. Very intense. Let's have a toast, Furley insisted. To friendship. To the Tripper brothers. Austin, get your brother out here. Jack felt a cold sweat break out. Oh, he's in the little Wrangler's room, Mr. Furley. Got a bit of a touch of the stomach flu. You know how it is. Nonsense. A drink will cure him. The pressure was mounting. Janet tried to intervene, dancing with Furley to distract him, but the landlord was determined. He wanted to see the 2 brothers together. In a moment of desperation, Jack ducked into the bedroom and grabbed a pillow, stuffing it into a spare set of clothes and propping it up in the shadows of the hallway. "There he is!" Jack shouted, pointing to the dark silhouette. "He's just resting his eyes. Poor fella." But Veronica wasn't looking at the silhouette. She was looking at Jack. She had seen him wipe the mole off his face earlier. She had seen the hat hidden behind the sofa. She leaned in close to his ear, her breath warm against his neck. "You know, Jack, or Austin, whoever you are." Jack froze her. "I think you're a much better actor than you are a cowboy," she whispered. "But the effort, that's what's really romantic." Before Jack could respond, Furley let out a celebratory yell. "I love this family. I love the Trippers." He grabbed Austin and Jack, the pillow, for a group hug, stumbling in his drunken haze. Chapter 6. The morning after. The fog cleared by dawn, leaving the apartment smelling of stale bourbon and deception. Veronica had left a note on the coffee table. "Uncle Ralph is convinced. My father will be happy. And I'll keep your secret, cowboy." Jack sat on the floor, the Stetson hat in his lap. He felt exhausted, his face sore from the fake drawl and the constant scrubbing of eyeliner. Janet walked out of her room, her hair messy, a cup of coffee in her hand. She sat down next to him. "So," she said quietly, "is Austin gone?" "Back to Texas," Jack sighed. "He was a lot of work." "He was a bit of a jerk," Janet said, though she smiled. "But he was brave." Jack looked at her. "You think so?" "I think Jack Tripper is brave enough," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "He doesn't need a hat or a mole to be a stallion." Jack smiled, the first real smile of the night. He reached out and took her hand. For a moment, the cruise ship, the Spanish lessons, and the crazy landlords faded away. There was just the two of them, the quiet of the morning, and the realization that sometimes the best role to play was yourself. Outside, the Santa Monica sun began to rise again, bright and unapologetic, ready for another day of comedy, kisses, and the beautiful, messy business of being alive. Chapter 7. The Ghost of Austin. The days following the great cowboy deception were quiet, but the air in apartment 201 remained charged. Every time Jack caught Janet's eye, he saw a flicker of something he couldn't quite name, a softness that wasn't there before, or perhaps a curiosity about the man who could summon a Texas rancher out of thin air. But life in Santa Monica didn't wait for romantic epiphanies. Jack's Spanish textbook was back on the table, though now it was stained with tomato sauce. The cruise ship job wasn't just a dream anymore. He had an interview at La Casa del Sol, a high-end Spanish restaurant where the owner was a consultant for the cruise line. "Trágame una botella de vino tinto," Jack practiced, his voice lackluster. "You sound like you're ordering a execution, Jack," Cindy said, pirouetting through the living room with a stack of files. "Lighten up. Be more Austin-y." Jack winced. "Austin is retired, Cindy. He's back in the panhandle, hopefully being eaten by a coyote." "I don't know," Janet said, entering from the balcony with a basket of wilting ferns. Austin had a certain charm. He knew what he wanted. He wasn't afraid to kiss a lady's hand. Jack looked at her sharply. "Is that what you want, Janet? A guy in a hat who kisses hands and talks about toad frogs?" Janet set the basket down and wiped her hands on her apron. "Maybe I just want a guy who isn't always apologizing for being himself." The phone rang, cutting through the tension. Jack lunged for it. "Hello." "Yes, this is Jack Tripper. Tomorrow at noon?" "Absolute. Unsurpassed, sir. My cooking is unsurpassed." "Yes, thank you." He hung up, his face pale. "The interview is tomorrow. If I get this, I'm one step closer to that ship." Janet's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's wonderful, Jack. Really, we should celebrate tonight." "The Regal Beagle?" Cindy suggested. "The Regal Beagle," Janet agreed, though her voice sounded far away. Chapter 8. Neon Lights and Liquid Courage. The Regal Beagle was a local institution, a dim, wood-paneled pub where the smell of spilled beer was part of the decor and the jukebox played ABBA on a loop. It was the kind of place where you could lose an afternoon or find a bad idea. Larry Dallas was already there, perched at the bar in a silk shirt unbuttoned to his navel. Larry was Jack's best friend, a used car salesman with the morals of a hungry shark and a heart that was occasionally in the right place. "Tripper, the man, the myth, the cowboy," Larry roared, slapping Jack on the back. "Furley told me everything. He thinks you've got a twin who could wrestle a grizzly. Why didn't you tell me you were holding out on the talent, pal?"